Emperor Xian ruled as a puppet while the real power lay in the hands of General Dong Zhou. Various coalitions of warlords began to form with the express goal of rescuing Xian from captivity in the capital, although they were heavily motivated to capture and keep him, as any faction who held the emperor was seen as more legitimate. These attempts failed and caused Dong Zhou to begin a reign of terror against the rival warlords, often throwing banquets that members of his administration were required to attend, which included live entertainment of the torture and dismemberment of captured rivals while they ate. He ordered the melting down of the large bronze statues of former Emperor Shi Huang that dotted his mausoleum and made into new coins, which, after being introduced into circulation, consequently caused all bronze coins to become devalued, since the new coins did not weigh the same but had the same stated value. Dong Zhou's downfall was in the way he treated his personal bodyguard, Lu Bu, who had been like a son to him. After an argument, Dong Zhou threw an axe at Lu Bu with malicious intent, but Lu Bu luckily dodged it. Although he was unscathed, he no longer trusted Dong Zhou, and he slowly came around to the idea of assassinating him, something that was being promoted by others in the administration. One day in 192, commander of the cavalry Li Su, who was on the plot, approached Dong Zhou and stabbed him. Dong Zhou cried out for Lu Bu's protection, but instead Lu Bu came forward and killed Dong Zhou with the fatal blow of a club to the head. Emperor Xian then was taken captive by Li Ju and Guo Si, two former subordinates of Dong Zhou, who were now in charge of the army occupying Chang'an. Li Ju and Guo Si began to bicker, pulling their army apart into two sides, which gave Xi'an the opportunity to escape to Luoyang, where he was intercepted by the warlord Cao Cao and taken under his protection to the newly established capital city of Xuchang. Cao Cao would use the legitimacy of having Emperor Xi'an to force rival warlords into submission, and it looked like he would obtain absolute control until his defeat at the Battle of the Red Cliffs in 209 to the powerful warlords Sun Quan of Wu and Liu Bei of Shu, a continuation of the Han. While not emperor in name, Cao Cao exerted practical control until his death in 220, at which point he was followed by his son Cao Pai, who forced Emperor Xian to abdicate, ending the Han dynasty. Instead of declaring himself emperor of China, Cao Pai instead declared himself emperor of the newly established kingdom of Wei, which would rule alongside the kingdoms of Shu and Wu, together being known as the Three Kingdoms. The kingdoms initially tried to fight each other for absolute control of the empire, but after a while settled down into their own domains and saw some success rebuilding their successor states. Things began to change, however, after the first generation of rebel leaders died and power was passed on to the next generation. Shu quickly fell into control of a powerful council of eunuchs, similar to what had brought the downfall of the Han, and the Wei took advantage of this weakness in 263 by capturing the Shu capital of Chengdu, with Wei absorbing the kingdom of Shu. The kingdom of Wei itself was being marred by continual coup attempts. Cao Pai had a son named Cao Lin, who had a son named Cao Mao, who became emperor of Wei, but he was assassinated in a failed attempt to regain control from his powerful regent, Sima Zhao, and was followed by Cao Huan. Sima Zhao then planned to take the throne for himself, but died before he could, so instead his son Wu took his place in a peaceful coup after Cao Huan, not wanting to meet the same fate as his father, abdicated, ending the kingdom of Wei and beginning the kingdom of Jin. Jin then began preparing for an offensive to conquer the kingdom of Wu, with the mission successfully concluding in 280, leading Wu to crown himself the first emperor of the Jin dynasty over a once again united China. The previous decades came to be known as the Three Kingdoms period, and it saw widespread death and destruction, with the population falling to just 29% of its level prior to the fall of the Han dynasty, but did consequently see great advancements in technology, including the inventions of the wheelbarrow and the repeating crossbow. Emperor Wu had two primary pieces of political reform he wanted to see implemented with the Jing dynasty. Uh, First, he thought, or Jin dynasty, excuse me. First, he thought a lot of the destruction of the Three Kingdoms period stemmed from a decline in the power of the noble class, so he sought to reverse this decline. Second, he reduced penalties for laws broken, which he deemed to be too harsh under the preceding administrations. While both of these acts had good intentions, they would have disastrous consequences following Wu's reign. After reunification, Emperor Wu was content to just sit on his laurels, and he staffed the entire imperial palace with 5,000 concubines, leaving day-to-day management of the empire to his uncles. With so many beautiful women, Wu had a hard time deciding who he should sleep with, so he began to ride in a small cart pulled by a goat around the halls of the palace, which were lined with concubines, and the closest woman to wherever the goat stopped was the lucky one who got to sleep with the emperor. Each concubine had a small apartment, and many concubines began to plant bamboo and place salt blocks outside of their apartment doors in an effort to attract the goat and increase their chances that the emperor would want to end up sleeping with them, and maybe, just maybe, make them an empress. Wu died in 290 and was followed by his son Hui. Hui was mentally retarded, and his reign was made up of one long power struggle between various regents, including uncles and his own nefarious wife, Jia Nanfang. His powerful uncles, which became princes during Wu's rule, tried to use their newfound power to control the compromised emperor in a series of coups and battles known as the War of Eight Princes, culminating in Hui's great uncle Sima Lun, Prince of Zhao, deposing him in 301. None of the other powerful princes supported the coup, so a coalition force deposed him 3 months later, forcing him to commit suicide and reinstating Emperor Hui. This upheaval created an environment which allowed non-Han Chinese minorities to begin to rise up in what is known as the Rebellion of the Five Barbarians, which starting in 304 saw the Xiongnu joined with the Ji, Qiang, Di, and Xianbei ethnic tribes to work together to topple Chinese control. In 307, Hui's regent uncle Sima Yu, the Prince of Donghai, had enough of the lack of an effective emperor and poisoned and killed him, replacing him with Hui's younger brother Huai. Jin control over northern China was lost to the invading barbarians who, while not practicing agriculture, were very effective in horse breeding and were dominant in their use of cavalry archers. The barbarian tribes set up a various number of kingdoms to rule over the north, which became known as the 16 Kingdoms. One of the stronger of these kingdoms was known as Han Zhao, and in 313, the Jin capital Luoyang was captured by Han Zhao forces, and Emperor Huai was killed. Huai's uncle Min was one of the few to escape the capital and make it to the relative safety of his uncles in Chang'an, and thus he was crowned as Huai's successor. The army of Han Zhao eventually caught up with him, and in 318, Chang'an fell to Han Zhao, and Emperor Min was executed. Min's distant relative, Yuan, then right away reestablished the Jin dynasty, this time with its capital in the eastern city of Nanking, ending the first half of the Jin dynasty, which became known as Western Jin, and beginning the Eastern Jin dynasty. Yuan did not attempt to retake northern China from the Han Zhao because he believed they were too powerful, so he instead instructed his head general Wang Dun to focus on regaining lost territory in the west. After Wang Dun succeeded in this endeavor, he began to exercise his own control over the western provinces. Yuan became weary of Wang Dun and then ordered the other generals to prepare for an attack on him. Wang Dun instead responded by preemptively striking the capital, executing the rival generals, but maintaining Yuan on the throne as a weak and ineffectual ruler. Yuan died in 323 and was followed by his son Ming. Wang Dun soon fell ill, and Ming took this as an opportunity to defeat his army and retake the western provinces, with Wang Dun succumbing to his illness during the ordeal. Unfortunately, 2 years later, Emperor Ming himself would fall ill and die, being followed by his 4-year-old son Shang. In 329, the Ji people defeated the Xiongnu people, who had been in charge of the Han Zhao, and placed it with a new state called Later Zhao. Jin army general Su Jun would try to take power for himself in a coup, and while the attempt was thwarted, the struggle weakened the Jin administration and army, who now lacked the strength to defend from later Zhao attacks. Emperor Chang fell ill in 342 and died, choosing his younger brother Kang as his successor rather than one of his two sons, since they were still infants. Emperor Kang would die 2 years later and be followed by his son Mu. Mu was an only child, so his administration was ran by a competent regent named Huan Wen, who successfully defeated one of the barbarian 16 kingdoms known as Chang Han and retook their territory. The kingdom of later Zhao would soon fall due to infighting among the governing barbarians, allowing the Jin to regain that territory as well. When Mu turned 18, he married Empress He Fani, but he unfortunately died less than a year later from illness before he could have a son, and was succeeded by his cousin Ai, who was the elder son of Chang in 361. Ai was terribly afraid of death and became obsessed with trying to find a cure for immortality. At just the age of 24, Ai overdosed and died while drinking a toxic elixir assembled by his royal alchemist that was supposed to make him immortal, and he was followed by his younger brother Fei in 365. While the Jin capital had been in Nanking for a while now, the former capital of Luoyang remained an important city, and unfortunately for Emperor Fei, it was captured by the barbarian state of former Yan. Huan Wen planned to take this opportunity to lead the Jin army up to Luoyang to retake it and continue going to capture all of former Yan, which would make him a war hero, and undoubtedly he would be chosen as the next emperor. Huan Wen failed, however, in conquering former Yan, so he came up with an alternative scheme to depose Fei. Fei was madly in love with his wife, Empress Yu, who tragically died before they could have any children. Fei was distraught and refused to consider marrying another empress following Empress Yu's death. He subsequently only had relationships with concubines, although these produced several sons. Huan Wen aimed to sow doubt that Fei's illegitimate sons were his by spreading rumors that Fei was homosexual and impotent. With his reputation tarnished, Huan Wen deposed Fei and demoted him to Duke in 372. Huan Wen ultimately decided to instead install a puppet emperor named Jian Wen. Unexpectedly, later that year, Jian Wen fell terminally ill and tried to recall Huan Wen back to Nanking to install him as the next emperor, but the ultra-paranoid Huan Wen refused the messages since he believed it must be some elaborate trap being set up for him by Jian Wen. Therefore, when Jian Wen passed away, he was forced to pass his reign on to his 10-year-old son, Xiao Wu, although this may have been for the best in the long run, as Huan Wen would pass away himself from illness the following year. During his reign, the deep people would finally successfully unite the 16 barbarian kingdoms in the north into the United Kingdom of former Qin. Xiao Wu and the Jin army were able to successfully repel an invasion by former Qin in 394, once again fragmenting them into many smaller barbarian kingdoms. In 396, while at a royal party, Emperor Xiao Wu made a joke directed at one of his favorite concubines, Lady Zhang, about how he could start looking for someone younger because of her being middle-aged. Lady Zhang didn't find the joke amusing, and that night, when the emperor was sleeping, she had him suffocated to death with a pillow, and he was followed by his son An. An was another example of a mentally retarded emperor, so much that he was unable to clothe, eat, or use the bathroom by himself, which was a situation that guaranteed there to be infighting within the administration over who actually exerted control, which ended up being a powerful warlord named Liu Yu. Liu Yu led the Jin armies north to defeat and take back the lost territory from the barbarian kingdoms of southern Yan and later Qin. Although he was gone, while he was gone, rebels from Guangdong in the south were threatening control of the capital, and Liu Yu was forced to return to defend it before he was complete reconquering the north. After repelling the rebels from Nanking, Liu Yu had Emperor An strangled to death in 419 and replaced with his younger brother Gong, who Liu Yu hoped he could trust to better defend the capital due to him not being mentally retarded. Liu Yu then left out again with the Jin army, this time heading south to retake Guangdong. The following year, when Liu Yu returned to Nanking victorious, he deposed Gong and made himself emperor, ending the Jin dynasty and beginning the Liu Song dynasty, named that way to distinguish itself from the later and better known dynasty of the same name. Shortly after this, Liu Yu ordered the former Emperor Gong to be strangled to death with his bed sheets to remove the threat of him trying to take back the throne. The remaining barbarian kingdoms in the north would unite into a single kingdom known as the Kingdom of Northern Wei. The separate exercise of power between the Liu Song in the south and the Northern Wei in the north would usher in an era known as the Northern and Southern dynasties. Liu Yu did not trust the nobles, and thus he fired many administration officials and replaced them with his commoner friends who did not possess the necessary skills to excel in their roles. This created the environment for rampant corruption, and by 479, after failing to stop raids from Northern Wei, the Liu Song dynasty would fall in the south to a coup by Army General Gao, who established the Southern Qi dynasty and crowned himself as emperor. The Southern Qi suffered many of the same issues as its predecessor, the Liu Song, and it came to its own demise in 502 in a coup orchestrated by General Wu, who subsequently founded the Liang dynasty. While the Northern Wei had found earlier success in uniting the kingdoms of the north, but over time would begin to see its power fracture between the administration and the military. Northern Wei administration was keen on recruiting Han men from the southern dynasties to move north to marry their non-Han daughters to integrate the administrations. As the Northern Wei administration became more and more like that of the Han, their army was still very much a group of nomadic cavalry archers. During times of peace, the Northern Wei had difficulty finding tasks for their army to do, and their efforts to sinicize them caused a rebellion which evolved into an all-out civil war in 534, fracturing the Northern Wei dynasty into two states, Western Wei, which would continue to be dominated by the old Northern Wei administration, and Eastern Wei, which would now be under the control of the army. Eastern Wei's first official emperor was Xiao Jing, but real power would lay with the founder, General Gao Huan, and he would rule as dictator until his death, at which point his son Wen Shuan decided he wanted the throne for himself, and he deposed Emperor Xiao Jing in 550, ending the Eastern Wei dynasty and beginning the Northern Qi. In 555, amid a power struggle, the Liang dynasty split into two states, with the new Western Liang dynasty serving as a vassal of the Western Wei. Western Wei would continue for a couple more years, but after the death of its original founders, a similar pattern of conflict between the administration and military would occur, with the founding general's sons deposing the puppet emperor in 557, causing the end of the Western Wei and the start of the Northern Zhou. Emperor Wu of Eastern Liang initially oversaw a cultural renaissance, as he was very well studied and he passed his love of reading Taoist and Buddhist classics on to the people, greatly enhancing their popularity by allowing subjects who converted to avoid having to pay taxes. The Eastern Liang army was much more powerful than that of the northern dynasties at the time, allowing them to experience relative peace, although this army would soon topple Emperor Wu, with the head General Chen seizing power, replacing the Eastern Liang dynasty with the Qin. The northern Zhou would conquer and absorb the northern Qi in 577. A few years later, in 581, when the Duke of Sui, a sub-state of northern Zhou, deposed the emperor in a coup, ending the northern Zhou and founding the Sui dynasty in its place, making himself the first emperor. Out of fear that the expanding Sui dynasty would absorb them, the Western Liang dynasty appealed to their allies, the Chen, to be absorbed by them instead, ending the independent Western Liang dynasty in 587. The Sui army subsequently invaded Chen and defeated them in 589 and absorbed their territory, ending the Northern and Southern dynasties era with a once again unified China under the Sui dynasty.